Here's one gentleman who clearly has demonstrated he is not going to give up, even though it looks like he should give up. And we all know him, but he deserves a proper introduction. My good friend, Gary McHale, is an activist and has challenged race-based policing in Caledonia. He's the author of the debut book, Victory in the No-Go Zone, Winning the Fight Against Two-Tiered Policing. It's published by Freedom Press, of course, and we are so proud to be involved with him. And we're also proud to announce that Gary will be a regular contributor to Freedom Press's online journal. Gary, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I want to tell you an interesting story, and then I'll get into how it relates to our topic. The highest ranking police officer in the province of Ontario is the Commissioner for the OPP. And so it was kind of unusual when I decided I was going to seek criminal charges against the Commissioner of the OPP and not expect that the government would do everything they could to stop me. The case made it all the way up to the Court of Appeal, which is the highest court in this province. And I remember Christy and I were there. I spoke on my own behalf. There was actually a law student course brought in to listen to what was going on. And you're standing before three judges who are elevated up. You're looking up at them. And the government lawyer stood up and spoke first. And within the first few moments, the judge says to the lawyer, "Do you have anything from history that proves your point?" And the government lawyer says, "Yes, we have this ruling from 1995. And all three judges laughed out loud. And these judges are in their 70s, and the one says to him, "Sonny, when you get to our age, that's current news." The very next thing the judge said to the lawyer was, "Do you have anything from a different jurisdiction that supports your argument?" And the lawyer says, "Yes, we have this ruling from Alberta." And all three judges laughed again. And the judge says to him, "The last time I checked, Alberta was still part of Canada." And so I got the hint that they wanted some arguments outside of Canada and from history. So when I stood up to speak, because again I'm trying to get the highest ranking police officer arrested, I said Oliver Cromwell in 1649 cut off the head of the king, proving that each one of us are subject to the law. And I proceeded from there. I won that case, and that case is quoted across Canada, including in Quebec. And we talked about, we've used the word culture. And here's the practical side of what I think people are trying to say. When faced with an injustice in Caledonia, what do you fall back on? What are the checks and balances within the system that allows you to deal with an injustice? If I was an American, I would have different solutions than if I was a Canadian. If I was born and raised in Japan, I'd have a different way of approaching something. But in Canada, we're under the British legal system, common law, and our rights and our privileges go back hundreds of years.
Are you sure?
Yes, absolutely. And so the higher you get up in the court system, the more you have to refer back in time, because judges are trying, I don't think they're all right, but they're trying to stay within the establishment of what's been ruled on before. And so if we look at the history and what we can do as Canadians when we're addressing injustice, we got to understand that the battle isn't between the left and the right. We use those phrases all the time. We say liberals or conservatives. We muddy the waters in many ways. We think that somehow there's a straight line between the right on the right and the left is on the left. And that somehow you're balanced if you're in the center. The truth of the matter is, the battle for the past 1,000 years has not been against left and right, but for individual rights and freedoms versus group rights. When the Magna Carta was signed, it was to give rights to the noblemen. It wasn't to give rights to the peasants. It was always us versus them. In the first Bill of Rights in the 1600s under Britain, you might think, because it's called the Bill of Rights, that it gave equal rights to all people. Read it. Protestants were allowed to bear arms. Catholics were not. So even within that original document of the Bill of Rights in the 1600s, we still had group rights. And the battle throughout the last few hundred years is trying to redefine things down to individual freedoms. The reason why there's a struggle today is the left has gone back, not to fight for individual rights. They're back to fighting for group rights. It's gay rights or native rights. It's the special interest group over individuals, where the courts don't look at you as an individual person with an inherent value, but are you part of a group? Are you defined as part of a group? And then we will judge you and we will enforce the law based on that definition of which group you fit into. I mean, Nazi Germany, they look at how much Aryan blood you have in you. Here in Canada, if you have 2% native blood, you are a status Indian. Doesn't matter if 98% of you is not native, the government now groups you as an Aboriginal, with special rights under the Charter, special conditions under the Criminal Code. You don't see the word black in the Criminal Code, you don't see white in the Criminal Code, you don't see a Baptist or a Catholic or a Jew. You do see Aboriginal in the Criminal Code. Where if they are convicted of a crime, the exact same crime as you are convicted, the courts must look at them differently. Now, that's racism. That's already in our criminal code. When the Liberal government thought about the gun control, we wanted to have a gun registry, it was all because we want to save lives. We want to prevent crimes against women. Why didn't you put an exemption in so that natives didn't have to register their guns? You don't care about Aboriginal crime? You don't care about Aboriginal women? No, it's because almost everything we do, Smoke-Free Ontario Act, we're concerned about people's health. Let's put an exemption right in the Act, exempting Aboriginal. Let's make our laws up where we take certain groups and put it right in the law. Everyone can see it. We just don't want to look because we don't like what we're going to see. We tell the world we believe in freedom for every single person. We tell the world that if you come to Canada, you are going to be treated equal before the law. It's a lie. Absolutely a lie. It's been a lie for years. It's just manifested in Caledonia to an extreme. It's manifested throughout Canada. But it's been a lie for a generation. We've been asleep. So when you're faced with that reality, a government with endless funds, us with nothing, you have to fall back on what the system allows. We don't just say we want European culture because they're a bunch of bigots. We want the European culture because it lived through all the racial arguments, all the violence between Catholics and Protestants, all the stuff that happened throughout history, and they learned from it. They created a system that allowed people with radically different views to coexist. Now we say to everybody, that system doesn't matter. Because if we tell you we want to follow that system, we're bigots. We're not bigots. It works. Mark mentioned about the Ipawasha Inquiry. I only want to say one quick thing about that. He's right that not a single resident not only was allowed to be testified during the inquiry, they were never even quoted in the report. But I am. I've never been to Ipawasha my entire life. But you go to the Ipawasha Inquiry report, And I'm quoted in that report. And the only reason why is because I hold rallies. I make noise. I'm the squeaky wheel. They can't ignore me. So the solution isn't for us to hide on our beds and wait until the politicians solve all our problems. The solution is for us to speak out. And if they won't listen, then do what we did. Rally at Fantino's home. If they say you can't go to a particular spot, that's where they go. If they say you can't walk down the road with a Canadian flag, that's what you do. If they say a black person can't drink from a particular fountain, that's what you do. Can't ride in a particular spot on the bus, that's what you do. Whatever they say you cannot do is the only thing you're trying to do. You have to force them to come to terms that their policies are racist. And I'm talking about every political party. Right? I don't cover it in my book, but the Conservative Party in Ontario is just as much to be blamed as the McGuinty Liberal government for what happened in Caledonia. If I were to show you the personal letters I got from John Tory as leader of the Conservative Party, you would see that he discouraged me on everything we did. He denounced everything I did. He won't say it publicly today. You know, now I got a medal, I got a book out. He interviewed my wife just 3 weeks ago. He won't put me on the radio. But the Conservative Party is just as much of a problem as the Liberal Party. We have it federally as well. Every single government department has an Aboriginal division to it. Can you imagine if they had a white department in justice? Or a white department in employment? Like, just change the words around and substitute the word white in the criminal code. If a white person commits a crime and is found guilty, the judges must consider the fact he's white. Imagine the uproar in this country. Imagine what people would say. And so what we've done is we're defining things as liberals and conservatives, and most people already have those terms pre-concluded in their minds. Conservatives are evil, bigots, racists, etc., etc. Liberals are for freedom. But the truth of the matter is, I think most of the people in this room are for individual freedoms. I don't want the state to say I can't walk down the road with a flag. The Aboriginals will scream out saying, no, no, you can't because you're not a native. We can walk down the road with a flag, but not you. Justin Trudeau, it was quoted already today, said yesterday when he was asked what country outside of Canada would you admire? And he said China. And it wasn't just China, he said China because of their dictatorship. Now, conservatives are always blasted for having a secret agenda.
How is that for you, Jim?
He doesn't not even secret. There's the liberal agenda. Because us average people are too stupid to understand environmental issues. So we need a government to force us to put up windmills. We are just too stupid to understand economics. So we need a dictatorship-type Trudeau government to tell us, here's the way it's going to happen. Because we don't want to give you the freedom to make choices. That's what he's really saying. That because he knows the way, he prefers a dictatorship-type government. Now, that's what he meant. So that he could force the rest of us to follow his agenda, and because he's right, and we're too stupid, then the end justifies the means. And so if I had a message to give you, start fighting the battle between group rights and individual rights. Get away from using the conservative, liberal labels, because most of society already has a preconceived ideas about them. But ask the average person, do you believe you should have rights? Or should you be defined by the fact you're white, or you're black, or you're Asian, or you're male, or female? How do you want the court system, how do you want the police, how do you want the government to treat you? As an individual, where they look at your isolated case and make a decision based on you? Or, oh, you happen to be a white person, so you must be the agitator because you're white. You're a colonialist. I remember once I was asked on the stand by one of the native people, what I was trying to accomplish by walking down the road. So I immediately started quoting from Martin Luther King, and the judge interrupted me and said, "You're not an oppressed people." Now, to tell you the truth, we bought those transcripts, and if that judge is ever in a case I'm involved in, I'm removing them. Because you gotta expose even the judges who are racist. Absolutely. They cannot be allowed to make a decision, you're white, so you don't have the right to protest. The natives have a history. They have a right to be there. You don't have a right to be there because you're white. And that's what he was saying. So I'm being judged by the color of my skin. And that's what the OPP do. I'll talk more because I'm up later. But I want you to understand our culture, the ability to do citizen's arrest, the ability to lay criminal charge. You cannot do that in any other country in this world. Canada is the only country that allows private prosecution. So let's take advantage of it and start having some of these government officials charged. Thank you.
We give him 20 minutes and then lots of questions and answers.
Let me try to explain the title of the book, The Victory in the No-Go Zone. Because the police and government lawyers know that it's not illegal for a white person to walk down the road carrying a Canadian flag, they have to be very inventive on how they twist the criminal code to ensure that they can tell some judge the reason why they threw handcuffs on you versus somebody else. And so I go through the various examples that they used, but the most common usage was the instant creation of a no-go zone. What would happen is we would walk down the road carrying a Canadian flag, and all of a sudden a van would show up. Officers would jump out and say, "This is a no-go zone." Certainly you didn't know about it 10 minutes ago, but you're being told now. So you're in it, so therefore you are the one who is breaching the peace. And so we have to arrest you. And so they'd throw the handcuffs on you. This happened time and time again. It was the standard practice of the OPP to create these zones that sometimes would move, sometimes they'd be stationary, but they only ever applied to non-natives. And probably the best example that I document in the book is the first time I was ever arrested was December 16, 2006. I was driving over to Caledonia, and while I was still on the highway, a police car pulled me over. The officer said, "We've been sitting here on the highway for hours waiting for you to come by." And so he then proceeded. I figured, well, you don't own any phones, you can't fax me a letter, you know, what's the problem? So he had a prepared speech, which he pulled out and proceeded to read. And he asked me, what was the purpose of going to Caledonia? And already I'm thinking about, we have two officers sitting on the side of the road for hours waiting for me to drive by. Good use of government resources. So my answer was, I'm going to Caledonia to make you guys look like a bunch of assholes. Now, unknown to me, they were wearing a wire, and standard practice, so was I. So when they filed their report, they submitted transcripts of the conversation and went back and forth a little bit on the dialogue. And the OPP did a press release within 20 minutes. Commissioner Fantino outraged that I was coming to town to make their officers look like assholes. It was right in the press release. Now that was supposed to make me look bad. And I used it against them. Because at that moment of time, for 6 months, people had said, well, he's coming to town to create trouble. He's coming to town because he wants to make money. He's coming to town because he's running for office. All these reasons were given for why I was going to Caledonia. Now I had an official report from the OPP. I wasn't coming to make money. I wasn't coming because I was a racist or because I was running for office. I was coming to make you look like an asshole. That was an official report. From there on in, they never talked about why I was going to Caledonia. But in the dialogue, which was submitted to the court, was this conversation by the officer who says, if you attempt to walk by the Canadian Tire and put up a flag, you'll be arrested. We have created a no-go zone. I said, does it apply to the natives? We're not here to talk about that, Mr. McHale. Well, of course I am. Does this no-go zone apply to both sides? I'm not here to discuss that. I'm only here to read this off. So the dialogue goes back and forth with this officer. Can I walk down the road with a Canadian flag? If you pass Canadian Tire, you'll be arrested because that's a no-go zone. Well, if I see a native walking around with a flag, I'm not here to talk about that, Mr. McHale. So, lo and behold, I'm arrested for walking into the no-go zone, which we videotaped for a good hour. Natives coming and going, carrying their flags. It's the greatest proof of the seriousness of the problem. It's simple. Why can't you carry a flag? Wasn't going to go beat anyone up. Wasn't going to go and create any trouble. Just walking down the road. And suddenly there was no go zone saying no whites allowed. Basically is what it meant. Natives could go in, but not whites. And I remember we've been very creative over the years on how to embarrass the OPP because their goal has never been really to expose the natives. Because the problem isn't with the natives. The problem is with the government officials. We expect that within every community there's going to be people who break the law. That's no different whether you're in Caledonia or in Toronto. The only thing unique about Caledonia was it was endorsed by the police, supported by the police, and then by the government. And we're talking about serious, serious crime. I give one example. The police always will say, or the government will say, it's police discretion. Each officer is making his own decision. Well, I recorded an example where I had an officer on the stand. One advantage of being charged, you get to force the other side to turn over all their emails, all their radio transmissions, all their text messages between each other. You get to get them on the stand, question them, because they can't prosecute you without giving you that right to do that. So I had this officer on the stand. His only job at a particular rally was to direct traffic a mile away or a half a mile away from where I was. But his notebook stood out when they gave it to me. They figured, we'll flood Gary with information. We'll give him 70 notebooks from all these officers that weren't even near him. Right? He won't find anything in those notebooks. Well, of course I did. This officer is manning a checkpoint. The native drives up and hits him with his vehicle. The officer tells him to stop. He backs up, drives and hits the officer a second time. The officer says, you do it again and pull my gun. He backs up. The native and his passenger get out of the car and start pushing the cops around. Now, we're talking serious crime. Right? Meanwhile, around the corner, all we're doing is standing there with Canadian flags. That was the day I actually went to the hospital and the natives attacked me. And no charges. What happened is the ART team, Aboriginal Relations team, shows up, escorts the driver and his passenger through the police line and let them go. That's what happens. So I asked the officer, did you want him charged? Oh, absolutely. I filed a report. Well, whatever happened? I haven't been debriefed, he says. That was a year after the event. And I said, is that your way of saying no one talked to you about it? He says, yes, no one's talked to me about it. So I'm questioning, I said, so you're absolutely clear, you want him charged? Yes. And he wasn't charged? No. Did you write down his license plate number? No. Did you get his name? No. See, two-tier justice means different things. No only does it mean you turn a blind eye to crimes, but you willfully make a decision not to gather the evidence. Not to gather the evidence. Not a single officer there wrote down his license plate number. Not a single officer asked for the guy's name. How can you charge him? See, if you make a willful decision to hide the evidence, then no crime took place. And that's how Caledonia went. Unless a crime was put on TV, there was no charge. None. Whether you're talking about the destruction of the power station, or digging up the, blocking the road for 6 weeks, forcing people to have passports, the burning down of the bridge, pulling guns in the fire department, on and on and on and on. No charges. By and large, most of the time the officers wouldn't even record the details of the event in the notebook. But if we walk down the road, you got the color of his shirt, his pants, every word he says, what he's carrying, what signs say, every little detail is recorded in the officer's notes. That's not by fluke. That's part of how two-tier policing works. So, when Commissioner Fantino made it known that it was costing $250,000 each time I walked down the road carrying a Canadian flag, basically because he would bring in hundreds of officers, I just decided to do more of them. Government may have endless money, but they really don't have endless money. They might be able to bribe to get votes, but blowing it on lawyers and officers doesn't help you get too many votes. And so we just did more and more. It took us 4 years to go through these no-go zones before we got the first Canadian flag up. It took a long time. Matter of fact, the idea of putting up a Canadian flag wasn't mine. There's a great photo I took back on December 2nd, 2006. Randy Fleming is here, and Doug Fleming. They went around putting up Canadian flags. They were stopped at a particular pole. And I took this photo of Randy standing there with a Canadian flag. There was no PP officer standing there holding the flag. No lie, they stood there for at least 40 minutes. Randy says it was an hour. Not really any dialogue back and forth. Just standing there, Randy holding the flag, cop holding the flag, not allowing them to go any further, with lines of officers to make sure you can't walk down the road. A resident was arrested that day, claimed he was trespassing on church property. So they handcuffed him, took him to jail, did a press release. And when I saw that, I said, that's what we're going to do. We're going to do flag raising events for the next 5 years. Of course, the church never did phone someone up and complain about trespassing. Then the tactics started to change. By January of 2007, the OPP realized, well, trespassing tickets aren't going to work. No-go zones, although you get arrested, put handcuffs on, spend time in the paddy wagon, spend time in jail, there's no charge. Because why? Because you haven't broken any law. So it's more of an intimidation and a harassment. I kind of solved that my first time in jail. I knew it was all a mental game. They wanted to intimidate me. I wanted to show them, you're not intimidating me. So the first time I was arrested, I had given Christine my ID, my keys. So when they took me to jail, they just kept saying, are you Gary McHale? I'm just a guy holding a Canadian flag. You want to talk to a lawyer? Wouldn't answer. When they put me in jail, I stripped down all my clothes, except for my underwear. Now, it was December the 16th. It was cold. And for all you who haven't been able to stay at the hotel jail, they're not comfortable. It's cement, it's steel, there's no blankets, there's nothing. It's not your hotel room. So, no, they had to come in and take my clothes because of course I could have hanged myself, you know. Wouldn't want that. So I spent 24 hours just wearing my underwear in jail. Now every cell has a camera. Now Mark was in the cell beside me. I couldn't see him, But I already had a cold, so I started coughing. All cameras had sound. Every time I coughed, I could hear the fan come on, the heat. Within about a half hour, I'm sitting there nice and toasty. Naked, almost, but toasty. I'm sure those officers with their vests on and, bulletproof vests, they were cooking. Mark's in the other cell cooking. They kept me in jail all night till next morning. I didn't eat any of the food. They put it on the bed. I didn't go to sleep the whole time. When I left, the next morning, I told them, look, you're playing mind games with me, I'm playing mind games with you. Just tell your superiors it didn't work. I'm not walking away scared that I had to spend time in jail. So the next morning, they took me to court, and if I had known that I was going to appear by video phone, I probably wouldn't have got dressed. But the idea of walking around outside in the snow and wearing my underwear didn't exactly even appeal to me, so heck, I got dressed. No lie, I was in court for 40 seconds. There's no charge. The Crown stands up and says, we have no information on this guy. And information is what they call a charge. So the judge said, well, we have no jurisdiction. You got to release him. Now, they knew they had no charge. They kept me in jail for 24 hours as a way of intimidation. So when they went to release me, I refused to sign the paperwork. You don't have to cooperate with the police. They said, until you tell me the name of the officer who gave the order to hold me in jail, I'm not signing. But the judge has already ordered you to release me. So the officer took a piece of paper, wrote down the guy's name who ordered my jail, and then I signed the documents and we left. The point of the thing is that you have to know your rights. You have to know the system you're in. We're in the British system, this culture we talk about. And we have an awful lot of rights, but you have to stand up for them. It's not that we don't live in the American model, where the government's going to come down and charge somebody with civil rights violations if the government breaks your law or if the police officer abuses you. It doesn't happen in Canada. Even the Charter of Rights. There's no government department who's going to enforce your Charter of Rights. You have to do it. You have to stand up. You have to speak out. No one's going to do it for you. So the book is about the fact that our system is absolutely geared for the fact that individuals must take a stand. I grew up, I listened to my parents, my aunts. Canadians are professional whiners. We bitch and complain about politics constantly while we go get the beer and watch the next hockey game. It's not good enough. You can't whine for 3 decades and say, why hasn't it gotten any better? Well, no wonder it's not gotten any better. What politician cares what you think if you're going to sit on the couch and do nothing?
And vote Liberal every time.
Well, it doesn't matter. As I said in Caledonia, it wouldn't matter if there was Conservatives in power or Liberals in power. I really honestly believe that. Because it's all about the politics of groups. And so, I got 3 chapters in here. The one, I must admit, Julian Fantino was the best thing that ever happened to us in Caledonia. As my chapter says, Julian Fantino, the gift that keeps on giving. It was the best phrase I always had. I'd phone up Mark and say, is it Christmas today or my birthday? And it always meant the same thing. Fantino has just done something stupid. And of course, I would send him personal letters on a regular basis. And I'll give you one example. It's not in the book, but it's a great story. Just before the provincial election that John Tory was running, I think it was 2007, I guess, I wanted to get as much media attention as I could in Caledonia. I wanted to rally 2 days before people would vote so that people would have it fresh in their minds. So I wrote a letter, quite a lengthy one, 5 pages to Julian Fantino, begging him for help. I said, look, I'm trying to get your boss fired, so can you go on TV and say something stupid about me? Because that's how I get media attention. So he said, can you please have the police in full riot gear so that we can have a nice photo 2 days before people vote? Now I imagine this went on for 4 pages. I asked him, look, we can work together. We'll get your boss fired, I'll get a new guy in there, maybe you can get a pay raise. Okay? Fantino reading this, the guy would be going nuts. Because I had his emails. He would send emails at the officer saying, sorry for taking it so long to get back to you. I had to take a time out. Like, what, go stand in the corner for a while or what? He was out of control. He was the best thing to happen. He's a bully. And when bullies are pushed, they do something stupid. So there's 3 chapters on him. And I had him so worked up. Everything I did, he was always on my email list. He was always informed. Before this book was even printed, the current commissioner was emailed. The lawyers for the government are all on my email list. They know everything that happens. It gets them so worked up because they think they control everybody. They think from top-down rule, they're going to be able to tell us what to do. And so when you inform them, well, you know, in 2 weeks I'm going to do this. They will hold 36 meetings, spend $400,000, have every officer around doing things, and in the end, they can't stop you anyways. So Fantino in 2007, he thought he had me. One of the Native women claimed that I had assaulted her. And at the time, Jeff was always videotaping everything that happened at our rallies. You can't do anything at a rally without having multiple cameras going. And so Fantino had sent out an email within minutes of the rally starting that he wanted his officers to overlook legal nuances. His phrase, not mine. To not pay attention to the timid crown. Not to listen to feeble lawyers. To do everything you could to arrest Gary McHale. Okay? Chris Lewis was part of a series of emails, the current commissioner, where they admitted there is no evidence to support a charge. But then the order. But you will arrest Gary McHale. Took that email to court, and the court ordered Chris Lewis, who's the current commissioner, charged with obstructing justice. So, by them arresting me, they were forced to show me what they said to one another in their emails. What people would see as a negative, it's not a positive thing to get arrested. You don't say, well, wow, it's a nice day to get arrested today. Oh, yeah. You know, it's not a pleasant thing. But in the struggle to win against no-go zones, it was one of the best tools we had. Because you get enough of those emails, you get enough of those text messages, and it destroys them. Absolutely destroys them. Because they don't know what you have. So in this case, it went on for 5 days where Fantino was telling the officers, you are going to arrest them. Matter of fact, there was one email that went out from Chris Lewis that said, I'm having dinner with the commissioner tonight. At that time, Chris was the deputy commissioner. And he says, Fantino wants to know, can we arrest McHale sooner rather than later? Well, I didn't know I was the topic at dinner. Right? I mean, he's so preoccupied. Of all the things in Ontario, Fantino said on the stand, I had him on the stand for 2.5 days, answering my questions. On the stand, he said that the OPP, I don't believe he's telling the truth, but the OPP installed a special accounting system to track how much it was costing to police Gary McHale. Now, I'm not organized crime, and I'm not a terrorist, but my next question to him was the following. So you tell me that when an officer goes in and buys a coffee and a donut, you have a way of marking it for Gary McHale? And he goes, yes, we have a code. So I thought he would at least laugh at my coffee and donut joke, but that's all right. Then there's another, he's a guy who likes to talk. He can't stay silent. So in one of the cases I had him on the stand, I would purposely pause because he talks too much. So he screams out in one of these pauses, and I know you got my home under surveillance. What am I, James Bond? I got a satellite? Like, he is the highest ranking police officer in the province of Ontario with 6,500 officers, and I got his home under surveillance? Are you joking? Like, this is the mindset when people get into this thing that you got to do everything they can to target someone they know hasn't broken the law. And when you go through, I document a lot of the stuff that takes place, but at the same time, the real power, I think, of the book is the positive side, that average people can do this. Well, maybe I'm a little bit crazy, so I'm not average. Maybe as being youngest of 6 boys, I learned you got to stick up for yourself. Maybe that's what it all is. But at the end, if you fight and stick to it, because time is a big thing. Believe me, I thought we were losing in 2006 until Merlin Kenray came on. And I think single-handedly he changed the tide through 2007. He was a great guy. He was always out at all the different rallies. The people I would like to mention also at this moment is because it hasn't been brought up already, is that in the last 3 years, the only way we could possibly even continue the struggle is with people like Jack and Marina, who are in the second row, their support. And Jack's gone to jail, and so has his daughter. They had the gall to put the handcuffs on the daughter as well, put her in jail. My wife's gone to jail. So has Stuart. Lots of people, Doug and Randy over here. I think we had 11 one day get arrested. That was the most number in one day. It's all made up fake stuff. You know, you put the handcuffs on, you go away, they come back 2 hours later and let you go. And, you know, it's meant for intimidation. But the positive side is there's some real practical things you can do to expose the corruption. Court system is the best way. Small claims is the best way for many issues. My time's up, so I'll answer any questions you want.